Hello, people. Welcome to another edition of A Dose of Drew. And today on A Dose of Drew, I have the Vosteed Mini Psyop. And this is in, get that focus going, Elmax steel. This is the carbon fiber and Elmax Mini Psyop. Pretty good for a small knife. This one's coming late to the party. The Psyop's been out. There's a new shipment coming, the mini ones and definitely the large ones as well. They sell out fast. The large ones still have not made it to this channel. There's so many out there. It's really hard to keep up with all of them, but it definitely looks like a winner. Went for the mini. And what does the mini bring to the table? Well, first we're going to talk about this. We'll go through all of the referential stuff and then the damn nice or nicer categories: design, aesthetics, mechanics, noteworthy points, intended purpose, cost to value ratio, expectations, and of course any recommendations or requests in the nicer category. Overall length on the mini is about 6.5 inches. About 3 inches, 6.5 inches tip to tail or thereabouts. Little about 2 3/4 tip to scale. So not huge at all. In fact, relatively small and deserving of the mini name. Weight on this is also, as you might expect, quite light, under 2 ounces. Tiny, lightweight, small, great drop point blade shape, relatively small, relatively narrow contoured handles. It does give the thumb studs do give you a nice little place to go. Do a couple of other quick referentials. Paramilitary too. Yeah, it's tiny. It ain't big. And of course the Para 3, lightweight in this case. Both of these in the S45V and Super Steel. Right, so it's tiny even to the Para 3. It is not a large knife. And for those who like small knives as a everyday carry, it's actually really nice in that. And it is just a blur here. And of course, not just any leak, but a random leak. And there we go. Right, to look at it, even to the leak. But if you look closely, like look at the blade grind is as high as it's very thin, but as high as the blur, while maintaining blade length and cutting edge similar to something like the leak. It's a very interesting cutting profile. We'll come back to it. And of course, here it is next to the bug out. S30V freshly sharpened as of, I forget when. And S35V and the Civivi Elementum, also a fantastic bit. We'll get a little bit of this. Looks like there's been some use with the bug out recently. But yeah, not too bad. It's the Elementum. Elementum's not a large knife, and it definitely makes the Elementum look quite large or relatively fairly robust in comparison. And this is even the thinner, smaller version. And of course, that just means that, as you can see, my Wiener is longer, thicker, better shaped, and all around just a better choice. All right, design. The design part on this is actually, it's not a normal Vosteed design, but this is really quite nice. There's the wonderful curve right there. It goes for a decent pinch grip. There's just enough room for a 4-fingered saber grip for me, but just barely. Like it really kind of almost, if you choke back a little bit, there just isn't. It's barely enough room for a pinch grip for the sliding, like the sliding 4-finger, so you can use it like that, or in the 3-fingered scoring. It's a smaller knife, and it's definitely for those smaller EDC. And the light blade has its own shall we say idiosyncrasies that you get used to. It's a little bit light to be flicking out super easy, so it takes a little bit, and the spring is tight enough that you can kind of stop it in mid travel, which is interesting enough. But the drop point design with sort of this slicer grind that gets really tall, extraordinarily thin blade stock. We'll drop one of those down here. We zero our thing. What do we got on our blade stock? right? 0.0925 behind the edge. If I can get it, this is going to be tiny. Ooh. About 12.5 thousandths, and I'm sliding off the shoulder. We'll go 13 thousandths behind the edge. That is a thin blade, incredibly thin behind the edge. Elmex steel can take it. Really, really nice cutting profile. This is a very, very, very slicey, even out of the box. Like, this is just tearing through. Like this. And there's no force behind it because you're not really displacing a lot of area or volume. So trying to move it through material, especially softer material, is just an absolute breeze. And while the ergonomics are great, it folds up nicely into it. The aesthetics of it in the closed position are pretty good. In the open position, it definitely looks like a larger size knife. The blade shape itself just screams useful. Very pretty cute point, nice swedge. It'll move through hard material, it'll move through soft material, and that Elmex is tough enough and it has enough edge holding to really just make a lot of use out of this knife. Again, the aesthetics, both small and large, is pretty darn good. The mechanics are where I have my biggest complaint, just because in this particular case, I'll see if I can make it so you can see in there where that, you can see kind of there's some, oh boy, it's hard to show, right there maybe, right about there. Looks like there might even be some places to redo the spring on both sides, but it's really tight right out of the box, which on this small light blade just really, really kind of locks it down. It's not going to come out, and it's a preference. I prefer, this has been broken in quite a bit now, and I just prefer mine to have a little bit more give. I like it light as far as the mechanics part of it. That's the only complaint. It's a subjective thing. A lot of people are going to like it where it's far more deliberate. It's not even going to come out. You always got to have a very deliberate flick to it. You really want to make sure that it goes through and that you get used to the timing of this knife. It's a great fifth pocket knife. It's great if you don't like to have your pocket knife take up a lot of space. The mechanics of that really goes, and that's kind of where it goes into the noteworthy points. This is a high performance small knife. There's not a lot of these out here. Everyone kind of throws a little bit out, but you start getting things like, where you have like an S30V. And if you start looking at it in the small knife category, well, it actually shines really well. And I'm not going to keep hammering on that too much because the very next thing I'm going to say is where my problem is with it as an outstanding small knife, because it is. The biggest problem this knife has is from its own corporate sibling, because there ain't anything this knife does really good I don't think is done better with the mini nightshade. From action to cutting to, you could, other than steel or anything like that, like you could really, really make a case for why you don't need anything but the mini cutter. Or what is it? Nightshade, sorry, based on the Chalene. Unless you just really don't like this angle, this blade. It is just a little bit smaller on, that's not going to show it, it's just a wee bit smaller on hand space. So if you just can't use the mini nightshade in any form because there's the rollback here just puts your pinky in the wrong spot or it's just uncomfortable, this does have more hand space all the way out to where this would roll off and then you have a little bit of space. So for bigger hands, the mini Psyop is probably where it's at. And that's really noteworthy point on it, is for a bigger handed person, that this is a great small knife that isn't going to take up a lot of space. And I kind of think that's the intended purpose. The other one has a lot of hand space and a decent blade with some choke up. And it really does well in the overhand or pinch grip style. And this does the same thing. And by giving more hand space than what is already, in my opinion, the best small knife on the market, by giving more hand space to it, you're giving a small knife to people with larger hands. And that's actually, while it may seem like an oxymoron, you don't always want to have a giant camp knife or machete when you need to do something small. You just need to open up an envelope or something. And if that's the case, well, you can absolutely, right? And you're done with your task. That's it. You don't need a giant knife. You can pull this out. It'll do all the little stuff nicely. It'll cut. It'll slice. It'll score. It'll do all of it. And it doesn't take up a lot of room in your pocket. So you don't need it banging around, jangling around. You don't need to have giant Jinko jeans pockets or whatever to carry half your stuff in, like you don't need a man purse. But this will do it. This will be that light duty pocket knife. You can have a pocket fixed blade if you're one of those people that does bushcraft, but you just need a little pocket knife for, quite honestly, EDC tasks. I honestly believe this is both the noteworthy point and the intended purpose of this knife, to bring this form factor to some people with larger hands, because it still has a good place in that EDC carry. Right, and that's cost to value ratio, quite honestly, it's right up there with the Schling Cutter, or I keep doing that, the Nightshade, the mini Nightshade. You're talking about like $100 or under, where you're getting carbon fiber. I believe the mini Nightshade carbon fiber S35 yen was $99.99. I think this might be $109, but it's right around the $100, where you're getting high quality steel, carbon fiber, great craftsmanship, and really, really good design and materials choices for a very good price. Vosteed, generally speaking, does things at an extremely high value ratio. You're probably not going to get a bad, if you're one of those people who goes by brand and not instance, you can probably be a safe bet with someone like Vosteed, where you're like, hey, it's I don't know if I'd quite put them in the, like, say, the Benchmade or Spyderco or some of that, but as far as knowing that you always get ridiculous value, Vosteed doesn't skimp, and they deliver on design and materials and execution in almost every instance. In fact, the only times they don't is where it might be something that's more subjective, which for me is something like that. Still a great knife. Nitro V, right? There's all sorts of stuff on it as far as the Corsair, right? This is not my favorite knife, but there's nothing wrong with it. Vosteed did a fantastic job on this knife. It's just not my favorite knife. And that's really going to be what I would have to say about Vosteed as far as cost of value and expectations. I expected this to be good. I was a little bit put off by the action, but when I realized that there's a bit of customization to it, I understand. You can pull this apart and change it up a little bit. That's fantastic. I think that's really cool. Should be advertised more. See if I can get it in the camera here. Anyway, I'll crack it open and see how much more. But it looks adjustable. It is something that I think should be out there a lot more. But man, I don't really have any requests. This actually makes me want the larger one. LMAX is a great steel. The only thing I would say is do the same thing you did with the mini Nightshade. Give us something that's in G10 and 14C28N. The 60 to 61 that Vosteed seems to get pretty regular on the 14C28N is just about perfect for that steel. And you can drop a $50 banger that'll do all of the same stuff, or $60 banger, and still provide high value with a really good steel heat treat and everything else. So if there was a request on this, it would be to give us that budget version as well, because this is a fantastic design. Maybe in the cards, maybe not. Overall, I'm going to give this one a 91. in the overall, the value isn't the highest, but it's not low. It delivers for the money. And really the design, great. It's got all the looks while having the compactness, the aesthetics, right? The ergonomics for slightly larger and usable, the aesthetics for tucking in and looking knifey, the mechanics, while tight a little bit, does allow for very deliberate opening and closing. It's not going to just pop open. Man, and it is a small knife for larger hands. It will accommodate slightly larger hands than most small knives. And that's a pretty neat trick to pull. When you're looking at something like this and you go, oh, wow, like finding a small knife for large hands can be difficult, especially with no choil. And this one seems to do a very good job. And it's done by Vosteed. You can't expect it to be done very well. There may be a little, if you're expecting something like the mini nightshade action, it is a little bit different. So the action may not be what you expect, but everything else you've come to expect from the company as far as delivering high value and performance for the money, you can take from this as well. And that's where I'm going to end it. The Mini Psyop, a great little knife for larger hands. If you already have something like the Nightshade Mini, the Mini Nightshade, and you're like, oh, I don't need another little knife, you might be right. But if you're someone who does kind of like the little knives, the L-Max and carbon fiber on this particular model, there's several other versions, does provide a lot of value for the money, even though it is just mostly materials. And there's a lot of other great versions out there as well. For that, 91, highly recommended. Though I would say if you're looking for just a single small knife and you already have something like the Nightshade, the Mini Nightshade, this may not be the purchase for you. But if you're someone who likes small knives, and let's face it, if you're on this channel, you probably have more than one knife. If you're watching this, you probably have more than one. And this is a great addition to any small knife collection or EDC use you might have. With that, I'm going to bring this to a close. So go ahead, take this video, watch it twice, comment as much as you like, be mindful of side effects, remember to like and subscribe. This has been your Dose of Drew. I am said Drew, and you guys have a great rest of your night.